Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the climate change debate in Africa. Climate change and its impact is one of the most complex issues in the world. In Africa, this is contextualized in a background of several near-term social issues, including hunger, poverty, and access to education. We'll spend the next hour exploring the climate change debate from the African context, with a focus on adaptation and on positive climate action. Let me introduce you to our moderator for the session, international journalist Femi Oke.
Thank you so much, and hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for making time for this session. So in this session, we have three very special guests and also your comments, your questions. We will be looking out for them. We will be curating them and wrapping them into this debate, the climate change debate in Africa, opportunities and risks. Let's meet the panel. Minister Prempeh, so good to see you. Salma Okonkwo, good to have you. James Mwangi, welcome. I'm going to get each of you in a sentence, if you can do it. I will give you two if you need it, to introduce yourself to our audience and also what you intend to bring to this discussion. Minister, you start.
I am Matthew Prempeh, the public servant for energy in Ghana, public servant number one, the Minister of Energy. I am charged with the responsibility of leading Ghana through this transition period of climate change.
Good to have you, Minister. Salma, welcome. What are you bringing to the table? Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Salma Okonkwo. I'm passionate about green energy and I'm an investor in Ghana.
Good to have you. And finally, James, bringing to the table what? And your official title.
Super. James Mwangi, I'm executive director and co-founder of the Dalberg Group, a global collection of advisory and other businesses focused on inclusive and sustainable growth. But I am also a co-founder of the Climate Action Platform for Africa, which aims to promote Africa as a global hub for climate action as a means of unlocking new livelihoods and economic opportunities for the continent.
All right. Okay. Excellent. If I say one sentence, I want you to take off the filter, all three panelists, and tell me the first thing that comes to mind and then why. Climate change and the African continent. Minister.
Our continent suffers most of the effects of climate change. Desertification, droughts, depleting water resources. And definitely we have to be concerned and careful about we having the biggest growth in the youth population going forward, and how we are going to secure jobs and a future for our continent.
Salma, climate change, Africa. First thing.
Opportunities. Youth employment, innovation, transfer of technology, development, opportunity. That's what I see.
James.
As the continent that is closest to net zero today, on a planet that is about to begin to race to net zero, I agree with Salma. We have a massive opportunity to create new livelihoods, completely new economic models that build on Africa's unique assets and make it not a victim of climate change, but the critical leader globally in averting and adapting to it.
I want us to be really candid with each other and our audience about the challenges. So all of you are very optimistic about the future of the African continent, and when we're looking at opportunities in climate action, for instance, there are some very real challenges that you have, Minister, in Ghana, Salma, that you have in your work, James, that you have in your work as well. So for instance, let me just give you an example. I was at COP26, the climate conference in Glasgow, and what I was hearing was a lot of the developing world saying, okay, now that we've used our fossil fuels and we've polluted the world, now we need to go to net zero. Meanwhile, the African continent has an incredible wealth of fossil fuels, putting a lot of the leaders on the continent in a very awkward position. So there is the wealth there, not just renewable wealth, energy wealth, but also actual fossil fuels. And I'm thinking about this challenge. Is this the debate when we talk about the climate change debate in Africa? Is that the big debate for you, Minister?
The debate was very skewed, very biased towards COP26. The hypocrisy was glaringly bad. That those who had benefited most of the exploitation of natural resources and be where they are, turn around and say, those of you who are now coming to the table, don't. Really, it's marks of a perpetuation of inequality into the system going forward, because we lack the technology, we lack the financing, we've polluted least, and yet the onus on us to become climate, to become, like my brother just said, we pollute least, less than 4%. We are racing towards 0, and we are at 4. Some are at 76, and they want us to be tarnished with the same brush. It's just not possible.
Salma.
I don't think it's all doom. I think there is the opportunity for the West and those who develop most of this technology to create technologies that would make drilling of the fossil fuel that we have more environmentally conscious. So let's come up with technologies. Let's come up with systems that would ensure that drilling off the deposits that we have, that we need to develop our continent, is done in a very environmental friendly way. And that's what I think should happen. Since we haven't contributed that much to it, we shouldn't spend money doing it. Actually, we don't have the money to do it. We've heard about the droughts, the hunger, the poverty. For us, the focus in Africa is, as much as we do understand that climate change is here, we should work towards making less carbon emissions. We don't actually generate that much of it. So I believe the onus should be on those who have polluted the world to come up with technologies to stop it and give us the technology to drill our oil, fossil fuel, and develop our continent.
Salma, give me one example where that has ever happened.
It would happen this time, or else this whole conversation.
James is laughing. Yeah, because I love that. Yeah,
it would have to happen, or the conversation would be useless. So it becomes rhetoric, and it's been rhetoric, and it's been rhetoric, and it'll continue being rhetoric if we don't take that step. And I'm hopeful that this will be different.
James was chuckling when I asked for one single example where the idea of loss and damage is how they call it in the climate crisis world. Loss and damage, where the polluting nations help and support the nations that are the victims of climate change, but not the perpetrators of it. And it's incredibly controversial, and money promised during the Paris Agreement, climate agreement, that hasn't turned up yet. It's been delayed. James, go ahead.
So the first thing I'll say is I completely agree with the moral case around loss and damage and adaptation and technology transfer. Mm-hmm. But I also think that the world has richly demonstrated that rich countries will pursue their ruthless self-interest. That said, I still see really big opportunities here if we broaden the way that we're thinking about the climate opportunity. And that involves, firstly, not just thinking about the energy system when we talk about climate. Climate is about energy, but it is also about a whole range of other emitting industries, such as construction, etc. And it is also about the removal of carbon from the air through our management of our nature-based resources. And across all three of those areas, I see massive opportunity. I was also in Glasgow, and one of the things I noticed that was perhaps less commented upon was the number of quiet individuals walking around with briefcases asking to do deals to access renewable energy, untapped renewable energy, for the purposes of developing green hydrogen. in developing parts of the world. Chile is already on the run in that area. A number of African countries are uniquely positioned to be major exporters of energy because we have untapped renewable energy potential. And importantly, we don't have emitting energy sources to displace. And so if you're trying to generate green ammonia, you're trying to do green steel, which will become increasingly non-negotiable over the next 10 to 15 years, Africa becomes one of those places that should be an ideal location. Now, some of this is about technology transfer, but some of it is also about creating the industrial clusters of the future, because innovation is a function of exposing human minds to new technologies and new contexts, and they will innovate. So if we want to be at the leading edge of innovation in these technologies, we need to attract them early, and we need to put them high in our stack of things we're pursuing, so that we're not struggling to win the industries of the 20th century that are on a path to obsolescence, but are instead trying to capture the commanding heights of the technologies that will dominate the 21st century. The second thing, as I said, is about going beyond just thinking about the energy component of climate and thinking about others. To pick one, I did a quick bit of math as part of the Climate Action Platform for Africa's work, just asking if we look at nature-based solutions as a mechanism for carbon removal. This is just our forests, our lands, just the nature side of things. Today, with no change to carbon prices, Africa is leaving $12 billion on the table if we were to apply the best currently available and understood principles to the way that we manage our land, the way that we monetize the carbon value of protecting our forests, and the way that we apply new approaches such as the application of biochar and other enhancements of soil carbon. We're talking about tens of millions of jobs just from making sure that one of the key lungs of the world continues to expand. But because we're so caught up in one piece of a much bigger conversation, we miss all of these other ways in which the continent, with its large supply of labor, with its land, and with its abundant renewable energy resources, is uniquely positioned to serve everyone in their self-interest.
James, I'm wondering if that means that there's a lack of vision from leaders across the continent. Minister, are you seeing climate action as an opportunity for the citizens of Ghana to become wealthier, to have better jobs, to be better paid? Are you seeing that?
Yes, I see the opportunities everywhere. I was going through a McKinsey study of the next big 8 jobs available. Electric vehicles, solar systems for local markets, plant-based protein manufacturing, wind turbines, assembly of microgrid, all well and good. But when you are a politician and you are a leader in Africa today, you want to be given the opportunity to solve your basic problems while not compounding the climate agenda. What do I say that? The number one basic problem facing every leader in African continent is a growing youth opportunity, restless for jobs and the good things of life. They want electricity in a continent with the highest poverty of energy. They want food. They want good life. Think about good life, good education, good health care, and things like that. And the only way we could provide that for that as leaders is not only to engage them, but also to exploit our natural resources for the development of our people. You see, let me give you one example that is very clear. Why is the reluctance to ban energy or fossil fuels in this Russian, Ukraine, rest of the world debate going on? Without energy, you cannot develop in any way. So whether it is green energy, you need the resources, financial, and the technology to even build the green energy systems in Africa. So whatever we look at, we need 2 things in this debate, which we are not running away from. Every African leader would embrace the fact that in his or her homeland or country, climate change is real. The sea is fast eroding our communities on the seashore. The desert is running. Why is this all this migration from north in the middle of Africa down Africa? The desert is turning ecosystems upside down. And so we need to address those issues. at the same time need to address the issues of an increasing population. And so we need our resources. Russia is the number one producer second producer after America in the fossil fuels. They haven't stopped. So we need to think about it carefully. Even Africa is the only where you can get the natural resources for the 21st century industry you're talking about. Lithium, cobalt for batteries and things like tantalite for our mobile phones and everything. And exploitation of those resources themselves has an adverse effect on the environment as well. So the technology about carbon capture, carbon sequestration, and all that, we need it, and we probably need it for free or through a grant system or a financial inducement system such that African countries will be able to exploit those natural resources while not disturbing the environment at the rate at which we are doing now. When you go into Central Africa now and you see how they're exploiting the environment for tantalite or cobalt, that is not the way to go about things. But what is the better way? The better way is to get the technology for exploitation that would minimize carbon emissions in the system. And that is the conversation that was lacking in COP. As for the opportunity, it is there. But every opportunity that you get, you need the resources to transfer that, to translate that opportunity into something tangible for somebody to do. So the conversation is not that African leaders are not appreciative. We are singing with one voice that we, the least emitters of carbon dioxide, less than 4%. We, the harborers in our lands, are the natural resources God has given us to develop with the human capital that God has given us. Understand us, support us, give us the time to exploit for the development of Africa.
All right, so I hear that complaint loud and clear. I'm not hearing about adaptation, because while you're saying, hey, developing nations, help us out, they are just doing their own sweet thing for the most part. Salma, go ahead. Yes, Minister, go ahead.
The adaptation is a serious issue. That is the nationally determined contribution.
You have to. You described the erosion that you're seeing.
It is going to cost, the African Development Bank did a study, it's going to cost us between $2 to $3 trillion in adaptation for Africa. Who funds that?
Yeah.
James, go ahead.
So a quick observation there. So I'll actually tie these two things a little bit together. A somewhat controversial view, again, linked to the fact that nations pursue their own best, ruthlessly pursue self-interest, is most adaptation will be paid for by nations themselves, which means that for poor nations in Africa, the key thing we need to do if we want to fund our adaptation is we need to address our poverty. And so I'm with the minister on the urgent need. I come to the climate action question from a jobs first lens. It was actually a question of where will the jobs of the 21st century come from that led me to climate, not saying climate, now how do we create jobs there? And I think the broken piece of the conversation around technology transfer that I've observed is that it's happening between governments. Whereas actually what African governments and African entrepreneurs should be doing is engaging with the actual businesses that own the patents, that are developing technologies, and saying, here is why my country is an ideal place to deploy your technology. I'll give a very concrete example. If you look at the realm of direct air capture technologies, which are very early in their evolution today, but will need to scale massively over the next 20 years, people will often say those technologies are too advanced for Africa. They're being attempted in Iceland, in Canada, in the United States. However, if you talk to the companies that are at the cutting edge of direct air capture or engineered removals, many of them will say the best places in the world to apply these technologies in terms of carbon yield is Africa. And so I would urge our government leaders, our public sector leaders, to focus on marketing their countries as hubs for this new technology, because at the end of the day, technology is rarely transferred in a deal between two governments. It's transferred when a team of 20 entrepreneurs in a startup decide that their next hub is going to be in Ethiopia or in Kenya or in Ghana as they scale up their technology. And you can see multiple examples of how that has happened over time.
James, I love that point, because back in the 90s, South Africans developed an electric car. It didn't take off, but the the know-how, the tech, the expertise was all there in South Africa in the 90s. And so there is opportunities, or there are opportunities for that.
And now South Africa is making electric cars for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just like, before we even were talking about this as a world, before it was a global conversation, South Africa was making electric cars, or at least a prototype electric car. I want to really drill down on its adaptation, because whoever funds it, and you're right, James, like the countries themselves are going to fund it for the most part. Salma, where are you seeing adaptation happening? I kind of feel that with renewable energies, that kind of is adaptation in a way, and that's something that you know a lot about. Please share.
It is true. For everything everyone has said, if you look at the poverty level for Africa, we're at a point where, not that we're at a point, for our situation, it's a situation of survival. I'm not a politician, but I would assume that the Honorable Minister and his colleagues are more concerned about the homeless, the hungry, poverty, creating employment and all that, and are not looking at technology and other resources that could help hasten adaptation for Ghana. And Honorable Minister, not to put you on the spot, but if we are given an enabling environment, investors, the business community who are willing and ready to work to ensure that we put systems in place, we would do that. Ghana has put a freeze on licenses for renewable energy, for example. So if an independent, please don't, if an
Salma, just say it. Salma, say it. How often do you get a one-on-one with the Minister of Energy for Ghana? I can hear Salma carefully picking her words. Salma, go ahead, say it. I will protect you.
All I'm saying is that there are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business people who have the funding and the resources to help hasten the process. But the bureaucracy and the bottlenecks are putting impediments in the way of getting this done. And one example is Ghana, where we have a freeze on licenses to develop renewable energy and any form of energy that we're not allowed to sell directly to the public. We don't even have the permission to develop if we don't do it in conjunction with the government. And there are a lot of investors in my field who would rather deal with the public directly than go through government. So creating an enabling environment would go a long way to help us.
Yes, it's very true. Like I said, Africa has the highest energy poverty in the world. And we solely and directly need the energy resources to generate, to transmit, to take it to the individual. But key, Africa is also one of the areas with the highest energy prices in the world. So when you add the highest energy prices in the world to the energy poverty or the general poverty of the population, the investor coming to invest wants an internal rate of return for his business. So there's nowhere in the world that the governments don't regulate this. So about 4 years ago, we signed, example, PPAs for solar at 36 cents. When our regulator doesn't allow you to charge an individual more than 10 cents, who pays for that investor's difference between 10 cents per kilowatt and the 36 cents per kilowatt he signed. So we want to assure that even though we need the investment, we need it, like the Americans themselves realized, we need it at an affordable price so that the average Ghanaian can pay for it without necessarily government coming to subsidize it. The amount of capacity charges Ghana government paid for energy, excess energy, last year was over $1 billion. $1 billion that could have been deployed for better healthcare, for better education, and all that. So yes, I do understand. And even yesterday in Houston, I got a couple of generators telling me, oh, why don't you allow this? Why don't you allow it? We are going to allow the generators to come back in a very regulated framework where, yes, you will make your profit, but it will be at the price that the ordinary Ghanaian also can afford over a tenure that is appreciative of the investment that you have made. So yes, we're going to do that. Yes, we will do that. Yes, we value the investment. Yes, we are thinking about developing our continent, but we have to do it such that no side loses, or better still, both sides win in this game.
Salma, you don't even have to put your hand up. Just keep talking, and then James coming off the back. Let's keep this brief because I'm gonna move on. But I'm interested to hear this back and forth. Go ahead.
Femi, you said you would protect me, and I'm going to hold you to it.
I will. Go ahead.
I would give the minister 8 cents. 8 cents, not 36. He wants 10. I would reduce it to 8 cents if he would give me the environment. Generate.
And maybe if I could,
and this is renewable. It would not be the fossil fuel energy that he is paying so much capacity charges for. I would give him 8 cents.
Somebody offered me 6.5 just yesterday.
Yeah. I love how our discussion is turned into wonderful haggling, which we're known really well for. This haggling could take some time, so I'm going to leave it there. James, go ahead.
One critical point. Part of the reason why our energy conversation in Africa is broken right now is there's been too much focus on the supply side and not enough focus on lining up bankable demand. Right now, we should be in a race to the bottom in terms of the cost of renewable energy because the price of panels and technology just keeps getting lower and lower. And we should, as a country, as a continent richly endowed with solar, be building as fast as we can. Because the new energy superpowers are going to be whoever developed these resources the fastest. Instead, we sit here haggling over 10 megawatts here, 50 megawatts there, because we have not put in the requisite effort to say, where is that anchor demand? Who are the hungry energy users around the world that we can promise, Honorable Minister, that if you come and set up your data centers in Ghana on this date, I guarantee you that on that same date, Salma will deliver to you power at a globally competitive cost and with pure green credentials, which is what you are looking for, Google or Microsoft or Bitcoin miners or whoever. Because these conversations are separated between a Ministry of Industry or a Ministry of Trade on one hand and a Ministry of Energy on the other, the trains aren't arriving at the station at the same time. And so capacity charges, unused energy is blocking up. So we're both energy poor, without enough energy developed, with massive underdeveloped energy resources. It's a paradox that just needs to be solved. Otherwise, we're stuck.
I have got some questions here, and I'm going to fit them into our discussion so that everybody who's at the Africa Business Summit can participate in this conversation we're having. So this comes from KDB Akawoa. Thank you, KDB. Should Africa depend on other countries for technology transfer to resolve the current climate change energy crisis in Africa? Or should we, Africans, not focus on embarking on innovative solutions using research carried out in our universities and developing in-house technology? That is a very loaded question. James, you start with that and please give me examples.
I think we need to do both. I think firstly, as we think about climate change, firstly, it's not just about the energy system. It's about how we build, how we transport ourselves, how we plant and grow our food, how we manage our natural resources. So everywhere there are climate opportunities, and everywhere there's opportunities both to embrace technologies that have been developed elsewhere, which is about making it attractive for businesses and entrepreneurs to move those technologies to our countries. It's not a G2G discussion, as I said earlier. But it's also about unlocking and leveraging local homegrown innovation. Our universities are filled with research into local botany and solutions for our soils and so on, which we just need to figure out how to turn into carbon revenues. And in addition, the more that we bring various technologies onto the continent, the more that we're able to innovate atop them. The mobile revolution, one thing I wanted to say before we went too far away from the energy conversation is sometimes I'm reminded of the way that people said we must protect our terrestrial phone networks by limiting the number of mobile phones back in the day because they'll bankrupt our national phone companies. But we realized later we unleashed the mobile phone. And once the mobile phone was ubiquitous, we began to innovate atop it. And that will happen as well if we embrace the idea that we're going after carbon, we're going after climate in every aspect of our economies. We will unleash the world's youngest workforce to innovate and develop new ideas, the same way we did with M-Pesa and mobile money and so on. What are those new opportunities to apply ourselves to maximizing Africa's contribution to meeting global net zero? Not for free, but for money.
James, at the moment, I feel like I'm at a rally that you're making us feel positive about what the opportunities are, which is great. But I want to hear, if possible, if you have one, an innovative idea that is happening right now.
Yes, I'll give you three. In Kenya today, one of the fastest growing companies is a company called Cocoa Networks, and it goes after cooking. Africa's biggest contribution to global carbon emissions is through our cooking, through charcoal, firewood, and in some cases, kerosene and paraffin. They've replaced that with ethanol, which is generated from plants, which is renewable. And they've introduced ethanol ATMs. There are 300,000 people cooking with ethanol stoves today in Nairobi. The beautiful thing about ethanol is it emits two things when you burn it: water vapor and carbon dioxide. That's it. And the carbon dioxide came from a plant, so it's not new. So no particulate matter. It's great for health. And this business has gone from 10,000 cook stoves 2 years ago to 300,000 today. Its compound rate of growth is amazing. The best part of it is it also taps into the global carbon markets to subsidize the cost of the stoves for the average user. It's a trick that's being repeated in the irrigation space by a company called SunCulture that has its solar-powered irrigation pumps for individual farms, but they're looking at how they can make sure that when you buy the pump, one of the things that we are loading into the pump is some of the carbon credits from the avoided cost. This is something that they're looking at. Other people are looking at how do you get farmers who are planting trees on their farms to actually earn income, not just from the value of the tree, but from the carbon impact of having planted that tree, so that in 2, 3, 5 years, you are receiving a check for what you just did. And these examples compound over and over again. So there's technology aspects to this, there's business model aspects to this, and then there's also financial thinking around how do we approach those who are looking to pay for emissions avoidance and say, not just say, hey, send us some money, we'll do something, but here's a specific opportunity, here's how much carbon we can go after, and here's how you will pay for it and how we will use that money. We need to be entrepreneurial in this.
Minister, I'm just thinking about your energy ministry in Ghana. Are you still sort of banking on your fossil fuel wealth, or are you also looking at something that's more innovative, renewable, that you would like to share with us?
Okay, yes. Ghana went to Paris to promise that by 2030, we'll have 10% more in our energy mix in renewable, clean forms of energy. Because the truth of the matter is, as at today, 40% of our energy mix is renewable. But it is not considered as part of the game because they call it legacy renewable. Because most of the energy is from dams and hydroelectric. So we are bringing on solar. We are bringing solar more through distributed solar solutions, meaning that individual households who have solar panels to heat their water. Even we've gotten air conditioners that are now based on solar and things like that. So we think we can drive more through solar and gas. Just recently, United States and United Kingdom and Europe have recognized that gas is a green form of energy. Like my brother just said, when you burn gas.
Where is that? Hold on.
Yes.
Did I hear that right? Are you greenwashing live in this session? Isn't that greenwashing?
It's greener, not green. It's greener than the other fossil fuel.
Yes, it's been labeled a transition fuel. In fact, yesterday, the U.S. Energy Secretary in Houston was telling the whole community that we should promote gas and gas and gas, because that is comparing all the fossil fuels. Coal pollutes worse and gas the least. And for African countries in Ghana, we've changed all our power generation stations from liquid fuel to gas. We have a gas agenda that we call LPG for growth, that we want to send about 50% of the population, instead of using biomass to gas because it's more cleaner. When you look at the way biomass is affecting our women folk and our children in cooking in Africa, in Ghana especially, we have to transition to a cleaner cooking fuel, which is gas. So yes, in Ghana, we are doing a lot. We are even having wind farms on the agenda, and even we are experimenting with wave technology on the coasts of Ghana. So yes, we are doing a lot. Yes, but when you are in Africa and you want to industrialize for jobs, we have to accept the fact that green energy alone will not be able to provide the base energy or base load necessary for industrialization. So Ghana is also on the threshold of going into a cleaner form of energy called nuclear. And I had discussions about our vendor country that is going to support us to power nuclear power so that we ensure the base load. If you put up solar and there's no sun, if you put out wind power, wind farms, and there's no wind, what happens? People are dependent. So you have to create a base load of energy and then more renewables and more renewables, and at least individuals deploy more renewables in their daily consumption and daily chores is a better option for us. And that is the option we are taking.
I'm going to bring James in here, but James, I'm just thinking of the blackouts that South Africa has endured, and the jokes about Nigeria power, and sometimes when I'm doing sessions with panelists who are on the African continent, sometimes the lights go out, right? So this idea that fossil fuels are the baseline and that we can't get away from them completely is like, well, how are they serving us right now? Not that great. James, go ahead.
Yeah, so two things. I think you already began to touch on it. We sometimes lose a lot in the generalizations. I think the answers in West, South, and East Africa may very well end up differently because it's not widely recognized. Kenya and Ethiopia, for example, are 90% plus renewable powered, right? They're among the 5 greenest grids in the world because of a combination of wind, hydro, and geothermal. Indeed, Kenya is one of the world's leading countries in geothermal technology. You'd asked for an examples of this being applied in Africa. On geothermal technology, Kenya isn't saying, well, we need to import technologies. People are coming to Kenya to say, well, how are you drilling your wells? And, KenGen, for example, is going out to explore geothermal resources in other parts of the continent. So there are these centers of excellence that exist in different places. The one other thing I'll add is we need to be careful as we look at how different people are making decisions about their energy mix, to understand that how you think about different sources really depends on where you're starting from. If you already have a large installed base of, for example, fossil fuel infrastructure, it completely makes sense to continue to use it for as much of its useful life as possible. However, if you do not have that installed base, you must think very carefully about starting the 10-year process of developing a new heavy infrastructure if you're not sure how many years you'll be allowed to use it or you'll be able to use it. For a case in point, look at the challenges that South Africa is facing now with a huge chunk of its national capital stuck in what might end up being stranded assets in terms of coal plants that may not be allowed to live out their useful lives. So I think there's something there about saying for those countries that haven't yet fully committed to a trajectory, they need to ask themselves not just which fuel is cheap today, but which fuel will be cheap in 5 years, which one will be cheap in 10 years, and which one will be cheap in 20. And that speaks to the base load questions that the minister talked about, the questions of sustainability, and the questions of playing to win in the long term. Get into the accelerating train, not the one that's slowing down.
James, Salma is applauding you. Salma.
He's absolutely right. In East Africa, Kenya, for one, had power crisis way before Ghana ever heard of power crisis. So they put in place a lot of systems to ensure that they had power. We never had those issues. So we didn't have the need to, and we're coming in late. And because they started way ahead of us, they also came into understanding renewable before we heard about it. When I started researching renewable, most of the people I spoke to and the companies I spoke to came from Kenya and East Africa. So for Ghana, we're late. And actually for West Africa, we're late. We're just starting now. So we would not be as advanced as East Africa is, and that is just because we didn't start early. But I would say that we're keen on getting there. I'm really keen on seeing Ghana where Kenya is. And with the minister here and with Femi's protection, certain that when I go into his office on Wednesday, I'm going into his office on Wednesday, he would be willing to listen to me and help us get to that place.
Of course he will. There's I see his face. He's looking very positive. I want to bring in another question here because you two have private time on Wednesday. So let me just move this along a little bit. This is from our summit. Traditionally, and I'm going to share this one with you, Salma, traditionally development partners seem to be the ones directing various country-led efforts like renewable energy and energy efficiency, but they're also linked to African countries' economic development and budgets. How do we really transform or reorientate this perspective so that we Africans have our own agenda? Salma, you're the perfect person to talk about this. Go ahead.
The policymakers have to believe in the local investors and what we say. If they are able to support us with policy and because these investors, international investors, are looking for where to take their money. And if we get the support from the legislators to build strong local protection, would be able to negotiate better. We're not able to negotiate better because we always come from a very weak point and they dictate what happens. Obviously I can't share too much, but that's the case. You would have development funds speaking to you about doing a project, but their goal, as much as they want returns, their goal is to ensure that it is seen that they are helping. Okay, so the interest is obviously not the same. And unfortunately, we don't have policy and legislature that protects the local investor or entrepreneur.
Okay. All right. This question comes from Abikadir Mohammed Abdunur. Minister, I'm going to give this one to you. African government's priority should be eradicating poverty and creating an enabling environment for its population to produce food to feed nations. Unfortunately, you will find energy, fuel, and fertilizer among the most highly taxed. So how can we assure affordable energy, fuel, and agricultural inputs? I know that affordable energy you were talking about a little bit earlier. Go ahead.
Yes. People claim that African governments do put taxes on energy, agricultural produce, and things like that. But when you look at the tax regimes across most of Africa, it's probably one of the lowest in the world. When you look at the financial incentives, the tax incentives given to businesses, and the tax holidays given to businesses to come and invest in Africa, it's probably one of the best in the world. People come and invest and they have 10-year tax holiday, they are tax exempt from bringing and duty exempt from bringing equipment into the country. Everything is being done by African countries for investors, not only to come, but to thrive. So really, when you look at investment opportunities around the world, there's this comparison about the incentives various countries give to investors coming. Africa gives some of the best incentives than anywhere else continent. The problem we seem to have, rightly and probably wrongly used by the West against African countries, is country perceptions. So they price everything and add country risk perception, and nothing becomes bankable in Africa. Nothing becomes bankable in Africa. And that has got nothing to do with African countries themselves, everything to do with the West. Example, you want us to adopt the technology to be able to go to net zero. You make a promise in Paris. You don't deliver the promise, the financial promise, nor you deliver the technology promise. Yet you want African countries to borrow at commercial rates to fund the preparatory stages for investors to come. It's difficult. It's really, really difficult for African countries. And people must assume, just don't sit back and say, your taxes are high. In my country, people say that taxes are high. But the last time I compared petrol fuel prices with the whole of Europe, ours is far below. Yes, we still cannot complain or still accept complaints, but it's still high because of the poverty levels in our country. But African countries must realize that we are in a difficult position. That is why we need, one thing that I always say, we need the human capital. And most African countries' human capital resides outside Africa. We need to bring our diasporans back with the technology and the skills that they have attracted to add value to what we are doing in Africa. I don't remember a continent that developed in the last 50 years without its diasporans coming back. India, Japan, just mentioned South Korea. They went, got trained, got educated, but came back home to help in the struggle and the emancipation of their countries. That is what we are lacking. It's not because our incentives for investors are bad. It's probably one of the best. It's not because we haven't got the natural resources. We have more natural resources than any continent. What is lacking is the human endowment, the human capacity to add to what we have to take us to where we want to go to. And I think that with a forum like this, what I would encourage the African students having the opportunity to study in some of the best universities around the world should make it a point that without they coming back to their motherland to assist in our development efforts, we get nowhere, or we get everywhere very late. And that is so crucial. I know countries without any natural resources who are first world countries. I know countries with every natural resource possible, and they are third world countries. The mixing link is the human capacity to do value addition in Africa. Africa is huge. People underestimate the size of Africa. It's huge. We are not overpopulated at all compared to other parts of the world. We need to be able to educate our citizenry, to equip them with the skills and the talent needed for the 21st century education, and be able to be entrepreneurial, to imbue the sense of entrepreneurship in our children, give them hope for the future. It's not doom and gloom. I don't believe that. I believe we have to work at it. We have to work at it. We have to work at it. Focus, persistence, and then we will make it. And that's the little I have to say. Because It is not the taxes that we are the least taxed when you compare ourselves to most of the other continents.
Okay. All right. I have one very quick question from our forum audience, and then I want to ask you all about leadership in the climate crisis on the African continent. James, you have 30 seconds to answer this. It was specifically asked to you. Industrialization and job creation, how is that impacted by a 90% renewable system in Kenya? Jobs connected to renewable systems. In 30 seconds, go. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Now you've got 28 seconds. Go ahead.
Firstly, it's perfectly reliable energy and the grid has improved. So on that level, it's clear what it's doing. What you're seeing in places like Kenya and Ethiopia is the beginning of a realization that green competitiveness could be a thing. That's saying that manufacturing that's done in that part of the world should be privileged in its access to global markets because it has a lower carbon content than the same manufacturing done in Bangladesh or Vietnam or China or even India.
All right, thanks, James. All right, I have 3 minutes left and 3 wonderful panelists, and I want them to talk to us as a forum about leadership in this field, the climate crisis, climate change, climate action. If you look for Salma's name, you will see her as a climate warrior. And that's how she's often framed when people write stories about her. Salma, what's the last thing that you want to share with our forum about leadership? Because I think leadership is the key to all of the challenges. Go ahead.
I'm really glad that the Honorable Minister talked about who I believe is on this forum, the students, the youth, coming back home. For me, that is part of leadership. They have learned enough, and I have a few here that mentor me, Justice, and they have a lot to teach us. So leadership starts with them. They complain about the continent, but I think we have to get to a place where there's a mind shift. We're old, we're tired, we've done it, it hasn't worked. You guys know better. So come back home, support us in developing the continent, and that is leadership for me.
Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate that. James.
So we need to embrace the complexity of our systems. And that is about everyone on this call, but also people on the continent themselves. I had the chance to study overseas and then come back and try and build a business across Africa. And yes, there was value in the exposure I'd had outside. But I've often said there was also a lot of exposure and expertise and knowledge among my peers and classmates who had stayed behind and had worked on the ground. And what we often lack is that engagement with the full aspect of this, all the aspects of the system. We fail to ask that additional question, not just why is this a problem? What are the root causes? But why do those causes persist? And if we go to that third layer and suddenly start asking, how might we structure the next power transaction a little bit differently so that we avoid whatever systemic failure has been seen again and again? Or how might we rethink our role as entrepreneurs a little bit so we tap a new pool of capital or a new source of technology or a new application of that technology?
Right.
Then we can begin to see different results, because the definition of madness is to try the same thing without success time and again, and not adjust one's approach.
Thank you, James. There's a very quick 30-second anecdote that the minister is going to tell us, because I was talking to him earlier about COP26, and he told me how African leaders got together at the end of COP26 and made a plan for COP27. In less than a minute, Minister, what is the plan that we should be looking out for that you are going to execute in November?
We want Africans to sing with one voice and tell the world that, yes, we want the partnerships for development, partnerships for growth, partnerships for jobs, partnerships for industrialization in Africa, because that is what is going to stop the northward drift of the people. people dying on the Mediterranean is because of economic opportunities. So we don't want to be exporters of natural resources. We want to be exporters of value-added items. So what I tell my colleagues on the forum is that don't be a commodity to be sold. Be a brand to be perceived. Come back and make your societies better. After all this education, after all these skills, come and mingle with your colleagues down home and let us set our continent on the path to a brighter future. Africa was the home of civilization. It was the home of education. Let it become the home of jobs and skills and security and development for the 21st century.
Minister Prempeh.
Minister will give you a soft landing.
James Mwangi, Salma Okonkwo, thank you so much for being part of the Oxford Africa Business Forum. I really appreciate your time. Forum attendees, thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Femi.
Thank you, Femi. Thank you. Great.
Thank you.